The HOA fenced off their road, turns out I owned it. I put a gate across the only road into a luxury HOA neighborhood, and by lunchtime, I had 3 lawyers and a sheriff's deputy standing in my driveway. None of them expected what the county recorder's office was about to tell them. My name is David Cross, and I've spent the last 11 years restoring a piece of land that most people would have written off. 240 acres. Half of it hardwood forest, half of it open pasture, split by a single gravel road that's been there since before the county even paved the highway it connects to. My grandfather cut that road himself in the 1950s with a borrowed dozer, and when he passed the land to my father, and my father passed it to me, the road came with it. Not shared, not public. Mine. Recorded on a deed that's older than most of the houses in this county. I don't say that to brag. I say it because it matters for what happened next. For years, the land past my northern fence line was just scrub and pine. Nobody wanted it. Then a developer came through and saw dollar signs. Within 18 months, Whitmore Ridge rose out of the dirt arrow stone entrance pillars. A clubhouse with a pool nobody used in October, and 40-some homes that all looked like they'd been stamped out of the same mold. A gated community. They called it exclusive. The brochures used the word private a lot. Here's the part the brochures left out. When the developer laid out Whitmore Ridge, the only road connecting it to the state highway ran directly through my property. My grandfather's road, the one on my deed. The developer had apparently assumed AOW, and I want to stress that word, assumed that because the road had been used informally for decades by hunters and the occasional utility truck, it was some kind of public right-of-way. It wasn't. It never had been. I'd simply never had a reason to stop anyone from using it, so I hadn't. That changes when someone builds 40 houses and starts treating your driveway like their driveway. At first, it was small stuff. Landscaping trucks parking on my grass to pass each other. HOA! Maintenance crews driving out at all hours to check on entrance lighting that was, again, on my land. I let it go because I don't love conflict. But then the letters started. The first one came from the Whitmore Ridge Homeowners Association, signed by their president, a woman named Denise Hargrove. It was polite on the surface, thanking me for my cooperation as a neighbor, but buried in the 3rd paragraph was language about shared access easements and a request that I formalize an agreement allowing the HOA to perform maintenance, install signage, and eventually widen the road to accommodate a planned second phase of construction. 40 more homes, twice the traffic. Through my land, I wrote back one sentence. There is no easement. The road is private property. That should have ended it. It didn't. A few weeks later, I drove out to check my back pasture and found survey stakes. Orange flags, driven into the ground along both sides of the road, spaced every 20 feet, running the entire length of my property. Someone had been out there measuring my land for a road widening project I'd never agreed to. I pulled every stake myself and called the county surveyor's office to find out who'd authorized the work. Turned out nobody had. The developer's engineering firm had simply gone ahead and started prepping for phase 2. Road widening included on the assumption that access would work itself out. That's when I put up the gate. It wasn't dramatic. A simple steel farm gate, the kind you'd see on any ranch entrance, installed right at the property line, where my grandfather's road met the edge of what was now Whitmore Ridge. I put a lock on it and a sign next to it that read, in plain black letters, private road, no through access without permission. Within 2 days, Denise Hargrove was standing at that gate with her arms crossed and a clipboard in hand, exactly the way you'd imagine. "You can't just block a road that people depend on," she said, before I'd even finished walking up. "It's my road," I said. "I can." She told me the residents needed that road for emergency access, for school buses, for mail delivery. I told her the developer should have thought about that before building an entire neighborhood, with a single point of access, running through someone else's private property. She told me I was being unreasonable. I told her I'd offered, in writing, to discuss a legitimate access agreement, and instead her HOA had sent surveyors onto my land without permission. She didn't have an answer for that part. So she did what people like her always do when they run out of arguments. She threatened to call the police. I told her to go ahead. 20 minutes later, a sheriff's deputy pulled up. Lights off, no urgency, because dispatch had apparently heard gate Dispute and correctly guessed this. Wasn't an emergency. Denise met him at his car before he'd even gotten his door open. Already talking, already pointing at me. Already using words like trespassing and illegal blockade, which was almost funny considering whose land we were standing on. The deputy, a calm guy named Officer Reyes, let her finish. Then he turned to me and asked for my side. I kept it short. I told him the road was recorded on my deed, that I had documentation going back 3 generations, and that the HOA had never had an agreement to use it. They'd simply used it because I'd never objected, until they started acting like they owned it. "Can I see the deed?" he asked. I'd been waiting for that question for weeks. I walked to my truck and pulled out a folder. I'd put together the day the survey stakes showed up Ayadaro County plat maps, the original 1954 deed with the road boundaries clearly marked, a current title report I'd pulled specifically because I suspected this exact fight was coming. I handed it over. Reyes went through it page by page. Denise kept talking the entire time. About community standards, about the county's obligation to ensure emergency access, about how surely there's some kind of grandfathered public. Reyes wasn't really listening to her anymore. He was tracing the plat map with his finger. The same way I imagine every officer in these situations eventually does. Right along the boundary line that ran through the middle of what she'd been calling our road for the last 20 minutes. He looked up. "This whole road is on your parcel. Both sides." "Correct," I said. "There's no recorded easement here. Nothing granting the HOA or the developer access." "Also correct." Denise's expression did the thing I'd honestly been looking forward to. The confidence just drained right out of it. "That's not possible," she said. "The developer told us the road was accounted for." "The developer told you a lot of things," I said. "Doesn't make them true." Reyes closed the folder and handed it back. He explained patiently that as far as the county was concerned, this was a civil property matter, not a criminal one, and that no law had been broken by me locking a gate on my own land. If anything, he said, the developer may have exposed themselves to liability by building an entire subdivision without securing legal access to the public highway. He suggested, not unkindly, that Denise take that concern up with the people who sold her neighbors those houses. She didn't like that answer, but there wasn't much left to argue with. He wrote his report, thanked me for cooperating, and left. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but Denise wasn't finished. 2 weeks later, the HOA's attorney sent a formal letter threatening a lawsuit over wrongful denial of access, citing something called necessity easement, a legal doctrine that can occasionally force a landlocked property owner to be granted access through a neighbor's land, but only under specific conditions, and only through the courts, not by installing survey stakes and hoping nobody notices. So we went to court. Their attorney opened with exactly the kind of language you'd expect. Community hardship, emergency access, reasonable expectation. It sounded impressive until the judge asked the same question. Officer Reyes had asked in almost the same words. "Where is the recorded easement?" There wasn't one. There had never been one. The developer had built Whitmore Ridge on the assumption that access through my grandfather's road would simply be worked out later. The same way you'd assume a store will have milk in stock, without ever calling to check. When their attorney tried to argue necessity, I presented the county's own records showing an alternate route existed. An old logging road on the far side of the development that could be upgraded to connect to the highway. Expensive, yes, but available. And a necessity easement doesn't apply when an alternative exists, however inconvenient. The judge didn't take long. The HOA's request for forced access was denied. My gate stayed exactly where I'd put it. The court noted, almost as an aside, that the situation should serve as a caution to developers who build without confirming legal access to their own property first. Denise Hargrove was not re-elected as HOA president that spring. I heard through the county grapevine that Whitmore Ridge spent close to $400,000 regrading and paving that old logging road into a proper second entrance. $400,000. That could have gone into an actual access agreement with me if anyone had bothered to ask before assuming. I still keep the gate locked. Every so often I see a moving truck idling at it. waiting for someone to come let them through the old way out of habit. Before they remember there's a new road now. I don't feel bad about it. I never told anyone they couldn't build a neighborhood. I never told anyone they couldn't live there. I only ever said the same thing from the very first letter. It's my land. And you don't get to use it just because it would be convenient. People like Denise mistake confidence for authority. They walk into a conversation assuming that if they say something firmly enough, in front of enough witnesses, it becomes true. But land records don't care how confident you sound. Deeds don't negotiate with clipboards. In the end, all the letters and lawyers and survey stakes in the world don't mean anything against a piece of paper filed at the courthouse 3 generations before anyone thought to check. That's the whole lesson, really. Assumptions are not agreements, and the quietest person in the room is usually the one who already knows how this ends. If you made it to the end of this one, let me know in the comments, AOO. Where are you watching from tonight?